Good morning to all the Build Up audience, and welcome to a new expert talk within the topic of construction and architecture 4.0. It is a pleasure to have today architect Armand Paardekooper Overman as our expert today. So I'm going to introduce him briefly so we understand his background, his professional role, and his expertise. Armand Paardekooper Overman has been an associate architect at Mecanoo since 2018. After completing his Master of Architecture degree at Helsinki University of Technology, Armand worked for OMA, the Dutch state architect Joe Koenen, and the Argentinian state architect Daniel Silva Faden. He's also a founding partner of Fuse Architecture. In 2014, he founded the real estate development company Urban Sync. Armand has an extensive experience in realizing spatial quality within the context of complex multi-stakeholder processes. Armand is currently part of the Mecanoo's research team MacLab with a focus on sustainability. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Let's start the interview. I would like to start with your views on what is your role as an architect to innovate within the building sector, which is known to be quite slow to uptake innovations. So what should an architect focus on? It is more on the building itself, or should he or she have a wider focus on urban planning? And how are buildings and urban planning linked together?
Yeah, great. There's a lot to say about that, of course, since there are so many diversities in the field of architecture and development and the built environment, and also so many things to address, especially if your focus is how we live in cities, the quality of life, the big challenges we are facing in terms of climate change, in terms of mobility, in terms of social impact. So the great variety we see in architecture and in the design profession as a whole is important, and also sometimes you could say even fragmented, because we see architects that could focus on a very specific topic like wooden architecture or specific innovations. And then if you ask like what should be the main focus, or at least what it would be our focus, is to really look on the different scales, right? To look at not only the buildings, but also the landscape, also mobility, also urban development on a huge scale, urban strategies. Because I think that by combining those and all these different fields and expertise, that's what we need. And not only as architects, but also with the other disciplines like engineering, with politics, with the people from the city, from entrepreneurs. So our focus would be and is very much the combination of those different skills and fields we are working in. And that's, so in that sense, it's the innovation we can see on the quality of a building being, for example, a new bank building, which is circular built. We have smaller projects even that, for example, don't use climatic installations at all, so that it could be an experiment. But the biggest and the huge steps we can see, and we will be able to, I think, really see to make a big impact, is on the urban scale, where you connect all the different fields, where you see how we can work on both buildings, on biodiversity in the city, on heat island effects, on water, on social aspects, the economics, on the buildings themselves, and how to bring all those together. So we work a lot, or I personally work a lot on these huge scale urban developments. To give an example, we worked on, or working on Rotterdam South, where we saw how a city that used to be and actually came to exist because of the harbor activity is now facing a lot of problems in social aspects. For example, people that don't have jobs, people that don't have enough access to healthcare, to being able to travel. So what we started researching there is to really look like how can we connect or foresee a new economy for an area like that. And from that, start looking at what would be the design approach, what would be the strategies. And then from that scale, start looking at the buildings themselves. So what kind of program should that be? How could they be connected? How can they be maybe part of existing buildings that are there already? And that is quite interesting because what I started with is that we see that we focus in general as profession, and not only as architects, but also as politicians and as consultants. We focus usually very good on a specific topic like mobility or sustainability or designing architecture and buildings. But the main issue, that's what I would like to express, is how to bring those together. Because the main challenge we are facing is all the innovations that are there, all the things and expertise that we have from all these different fields, they're great. I think we can solve all the issues and challenges we are facing in a very good way. We have everything to do it. But the main difficulty we are facing, not only we as architects, but as a whole, is how to bring it together, how to scale up, how to speed up and bring all these innovations into practice. And for that, I would say the main focus also of designers, of architects, should really be to visualize that and to bring all these potentials together from actually, I would say, a lot of innovations and parties that do a great job. But for some reason, they usually stay in an innovation state or in an experiment or in just being partly implemented, right? And I think there we can make a huge difference.
There is a strong push in terms of policies and regulations and investments from the European Union concerning energy efficiency targets and sustainable construction. How has architecture and urban planning changed in the last few years, and how they are supposed to change in the years to come in order to respond to this energy transition?
Yeah, so policy-wise, there's for sure a lot of things happening, and also all the difficulties that we are seeing there, right? So if we just look at the Paris Agreement, or even how each country is focusing on that and trying to implement that, then the process itself is already difficult, but then the next that we are still very much discovering, I would say, how to make them real and how to see them into practice happening as well. As I just said in the previous question, the fact of actually being able to solve it, I think is not as much as the main difficulty. I think in whatever we see, we do see the process, the innovations to solve it, the technology to solve it, also the smart ideas to solve it. We even see in practice, especially here, and that would be really the focus here in Europe, we see the financial situation that we can even solve it. But the main challenge is really to bring it together. And policies and regulations are not enough, right? That's really not enough to speed up and scale up. So one thing I would really think is important is that, and that's the best to show it by some examples, is really to not only design, if we look at the new buildings, where we can make buildings that are energy neutral, that really don't have any carbon emissions. This is something we can already see that we are able to do it. We can also see in mobility that we can find ways to make it sustainable. But the main challenge is, one, very important also that I think you need also maybe it needs some time in terms of generations, right? Because we are so much used to our habits and our current comfort and our welfare. So it's not a way to say, well, we should all behave different and then it will work. That is one of the things. Then you can say, of course, let's make a lot of rules and regulations to solve these issues and to make people really do it in a different way. But I also think that it should be enormously attractive sustainability, right? So if you want to make the changes, then if we look at the city, we can say, okay, we have a problem with water here in Holland a lot, right? Like, because of climate change, we see heat island effects, and on the other hand, we see huge water problems as well in the Netherlands. Now, we can say we have to solve it by all kinds of rules, or as designers, do we come up with beautiful solutions of creating cities that are nature inclusive, where you have beautiful parks, where you use the water to cool the city, where we can use the water to even store energy, where we can add beautiful green spaces for nice ways of cycling, of walking, to play and to stay. And that is something that where you start taking the problem and taking the issues we are facing in urban development and transforming them to beautiful places and the positive aspects. So instead of seeing them as a problem, the great thing is if we, and that's really a beautiful, yeah, I think a beautiful characteristic or expertise from architects, to change them into positive elements. So by seeing problems and transforming them into things that actually solve problems, challenges we are facing in cities. And to name one that also in relation to Rotterdam that I was just explaining, we had in Holland in the 50s, of course, huge floods from sea level rise. And then a city like Rotterdam has within the cities quite huge barriers actually that are dikes. So they are protecting the city from high level water rise. Now what we see in a city like that is that there are barriers that even create social problems, that they are even disconnect different areas. So they can disconnect, for example, neighborhoods from the economy of the riverfront and with harbors. So that is actually something that a physical boundary that we create. And then what we came up to as a solution is to create this whole dike and to transform it to something which stays also a water barrier, but also even becomes a place as a huge park, a 10 kilometer park that actually stretches all over the city, contribute to decreasing the heat of the city, absorbing water, increasing the amount of biodiversity and ecology. And at the same time, we created that dike instead of a barrier to create high-speed cycling routes so that it actually becomes a way to move from one place to the other in the city, and that it also starts connecting the neighborhoods with the economy on the other side of that dike, with the harbor front, with entrepreneurs. And these kind of examples, I think, are great because they can solve a lot in urban development, and they would, for example, solve issues like the huge amount of cars and mobility that we see in a city like Rotterdam now. Just to clarify that a bit more, what is happening now in a lot of cities, not only here in Rotterdam, but a lot of cities in the world, I would even say, is that we face the problem of cars, then our solution is to change to electrical vehicles or even hydrogen cars, or adding new infrastructure for that to make it suitable, right? But if you look at that, then that's only a very small solution for the problem of mobility within cities. The point is that a lot of people, they have to travel because the city itself is too expensive, then you live somewhere in the suburb or further away to move to your job. So that is the reason why you have to travel that much. And then we have to come up with all the solutions of better and more sustainable ways of traveling. And what if we look at it in a complete different way and solving by saying, why don't we make a city more inclusive? Do we still have to travel? Is it maybe possible to find cheaper ways and faster ways to build and healthier ways of building within cities, so that you actually maybe solve the problem by looking at it from a complete different angle, right? Designing an inclusive city where you can live, where you can have your jobs, where you can actually play and relax, find leisure. By this example of this dike that created as a park, that are solutions where how you can find, make cities very attractive instead of solving the issue from the current situation, right? That's usually what we do wrong. We take the situation as it is, and then starting to solve it or create a bit better solution for it. Instead of doing it the other way around, where we actually say, can we maybe make a city that attractive that we don't have to solve all these issues of traveling by car and having new ways of traveling, or even making the buildings completely new, right? I think that is the very interesting way of how we can deal with cities and urban development. Yeah, so even on the scale of a building, if I could just continue a bit on that, is what we usually do is the same principle, that we have a building, and we can be a new building or an existing one. Then we get the question, like, can we make this building carbon emission free, or without any emissions? Can we make it energy neutral? That's always actually the question we are facing now, of course, because we have to all try, or we have to find ways to make the Paris Agreement real. Now, then what is happening is that you actually do something wrong, because you take the current situation, you have your current rules, and then within that context, we start to improve a bit. So, for example, if you have a new building for a theater, or for maybe a swimming pool, or for housing even, then what you start doing is to let's find maybe a climatic insulation which is better so that it will become energy neutral. Let's add maybe some solar panels, let's add maybe heat storage or thermal effect, right, to improve that building so that it actually fits within the zero energy quotation that we have to achieve. And what we try to do as well is to ask ourselves the question, maybe without looking at those rules that we already have, can we maybe make a building without all these installations? Can we make a building that doesn't need maybe solar panels or all the technical and smart solutions? I think that's a great way also, and a very important one to work on for the huge challenges we have, because whatever we don't have to use will solve the situation in a lot better and faster way. So then we came up, for example, with the building we just designed and also was realized and finished, where we don't have any climatic installations, but all in passive, with passive means and methods. So using the cooling of the earth, using the right orientation towards its surroundings, using a chimney effect for natural ventilation. So all these kind of aspects, they are great, and then you don't need maybe in a first instance, like we usually do, looking at all the technical solutions to make your building sustainable. And what is the situation here for this building that I just mentioned? Is that to be honest, because this is on a living lab, on a testing ground at the Technical University here in Delft, that we were able to build it. But to be honest, it doesn't fit the current regulations, right? So the great thing about that project is that the municipality of the city said, well, we would like you to innovate, to experiment, and to improve. And the great thing that happens then is you let go of those rules, that you can come up with solutions that also do not fit the rules, but maybe can come up with a better solution for it. And I think that would be a really, really important way to face both urban planning, architecture, because what you do then is to think first of what would be the best way to solve the problems that we have, to come up with new solutions, and then look how should our rules and regulations be. And that is, I think, the answer to your question, that the policies that we have now and all the rules we are creating, that would be my main message. Don't make them the most important, but first look at the smart and good solutions that we can come up with, and then look what rules and what kind of incentives do we need to make those things happen, speed up and scale up.
Very clear. Can you give us some more examples, talking about the buildings, in the building scale, from your projects that you're working on, that you worked? So if you can give us more examples when you implemented some innovative technologies and innovative materials.
Yeah, so the innovations that we need or that we can look at is usually in the current situation quite often that we see the solution in new technologies, right? So smart cities, smart innovations. This is quite much focusing on the technical side. So I don't say it's wrong. I think we should also look at all the means we have to make the big steps we have to make. But an example that I would like to give is also a building that we are developing now here in Holland, and I think it's the case in more countries, but for sure here we have this problem with too much nitrogen, right, in the surroundings. And it affects us all because it affects also the farming, it affects the food production, it affects the places where we are allowed to build. So we came up with an idea to make the No-No house, as it's called. It's an experiment here also at the technical university that we do together with different parties. The university itself, researchers, University of Wageningen, which is University on research of agriculture, the natural environment, then we also have different parties from the field of development and construction. So what we did there is that we said, can we make a building that doesn't have any emissions at all? And maybe instead of even not only producing emissions, but can we make a building that absorbs all the emissions that we can see in the city? So that's, and we came up by, a lot of innovations actually that we are also researching and trying to improve. But for example, new materials made out of, so facades made out of dirt, right? So that we find a lot here in the Holland Delta. And that dirt, you could make out of it new facade panels. And those facade panels made out of that dirt, they are the perfect base and perfect underground for mosses to grow on. And these mosses, they're great because they absorb, for example, different kinds of emissions that we have and that we don't want in the surroundings of our urban environment. The great thing of that is actually, of those moss, is even that when the amount of nitrogen in the air is too much, then it changes color. So the beautiful thing of it is that when you have this kind of vegetation on your facade, on your buildings, that you could even see how the quality of the air and of your surroundings is. So that's one of the things we are doing there. The other is also the construction. For example, very important if you want to build without any emissions, then it's not only the materials itself, but also the way of constructing. So what we use here is machines that are all electrical. So no diesel generation by for the cranes and for all the equipment that you need to construct a building. So it's really about the building itself and about the process. Then in terms of the building that we are trying to build, we also are looking at the kind of wood that we are using. So that is local wood. And this is made of tree, which is locally grown. And it's a specific tree that even by its growth, it's growing very fast, absorbs a lot of the emissions that we are having in the surroundings. Then other innovations is also very simple means that the water that is coming in the surroundings and on the building, that we collect it on the roof, and the water is helping to absorb also the heat of the building and also to cool the building in a passive way. And at the same time, what happens is if you have the water roof, it also is a place for growing vegetation that again on itself also absorbs different emissions from the surroundings. And very interesting is also the foundation of a building. That's not only for this building, but also for another building that we did there. That we made it of 100% recycled concrete. This is always a challenge because you want to have the foundations and your energy piles with a certain quality in the concrete that is not always possible with recycled concrete. But here we managed to make the complete foundation and the foundation piles out of 100% recycled concrete with the same quality as new concrete. And this is something that is done also for the first time here in this building. And very interesting, especially for the foundation piles, is that they are a specific innovation from also a startup that is working on the university. And these foundation piles, they are energy piles, so they store warmth and in the summer the cooled air by water in the foundation piles. And you can reuse them once you would like to heat up the building in wintertime or want to cool it. So it becomes a very interesting integrated system. Now, these are innovations on both material and the production, so the construction of a building. And I think a very important innovation we're also looking at is the process and the business case, right? This is an important part because especially if we think of what we see in architecture when we talk about circularity, we don't want to create waste. The whole building industry is one of the fields where we do create a lot of waste during the construction of buildings, but also once a building is not used anymore or when it will be demolished. Now, one example is that concrete that can be recycled completely, and that we can see in a lot of materials. But one important aspect to research better and to put more into practice, we see some examples of that, is also to look at the business case that the producer of a material will stay the owner for the lifespan that a building has. And once a building will be demolished, he will still be the owner and take it back, right? So then you're actually leasing your materials, your construction, your installations, and then it will be actually only a way of using it as long as you want to use it for the building. And then after that, it still has a huge value. So this is quite interesting also for some of the parts of this building where, for example, the floor of the building is leased by a company, and he will stay the owner, will be responsible for the maintenance of it, and then also to take it back after the lifetime of this building. I would like to give one more important example of business case that really helps to work on sustainable, to improve and to scale up and speed up, especially on sustainability. Because the examples I give here, that's quite good, of course, but the point is that we here in Europe, I think we have the means, we have the financial possibilities. But if you look worldwide, then the problem is so much bigger, right? We see that about 2 billion people, they don't, in 2030, 2035, they don't have a house, they don't have a place to live, they don't have a roof. So we can solve the problems here, I would say. We can innovate, we can experiment. But how to solve it for that global challenge we are facing, which is a lot bigger than only looking at the situation here in Holland or in Europe. So what we came up with was also a quite, I think, interesting idea, is to work on affordable housing, not only by innovation of materials and construction-wise, but what we did there is to come up with a new way of a business case in investing in it. You see that no one wants to invest in affordable housing because these people, they are often refugees for climate, for wars or whatever. And they don't have any money to pay a rent or to pay a house, afford a house even, right? So what we started looking at is there another way to finance it and at the same time be making it a lot more sustainable? And what we did there is to make a house very simple, easy to construct, but the whole roof is made out of solar panels. And by selling the electricity, we are able to attract the investors. We already did. And we're also able to construct the house and make people that have nothing live there for free. And this is called the Power Height concept. And this house we have been constructing now a few in India. And because the business case, the financial business case is self-sustaining, right? We don't need to get it back from a certain rent, but only by selling the energy and the electricity from the solar panels. We are able to scale up. And now in Sri Lanka, we are working on a project of 5,000 homes like that. So innovations are there. Technology is there. I think it's all there. We can do it, and even the finance, but we also should look on that global scale very much on the innovations, not only from the build industry and the process and the strategy, but very much also from the business case, that it becomes so much profitable financially even to be able to do it. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Then we just stay with some examples of innovation and experiments.
So I would like to focus on the current situation and the global emergency we had with COVID-19 and its impact on the building sector and urban planning as well. So do you think that COVID-19 will influence somehow the way houses will be designed and built, and also the effect on urban planning? What would they be? What's your opinion?
Yeah, that's a question that you hear a lot right at the moment. And also people thinking like, will it really change also for good? Will it affect the way we live, the way we work? I think to a certain extent it will. Especially if you look at very simple and very concrete examples of what I see here, towers, right? With offices in it, and people cannot use those towers because you cannot go in the elevator altogether, right? So these kind of very concrete examples we see. If we look at the architecture and the way you design buildings, I think they will also affect that aspect. And also from the technical aspect, if you look at the need of ventilation and how to ventilate in a better way, we even just got the news here that ventilation might be even one of the causes, right, why COVID within buildings would increase, right, in schools, for example, or so that's something that is in research now. But maybe on a bigger scale, if you look a bit wider than that, than just the built environment and the buildings itself and architecture, then despite the fact that it is, of course, an awful situation and that it's something very hard to cope with and also to see when it affects so many people and the health of a lot of people, then it does bring us also something, a great insight, to be honest, because what we saw in the last maybe 10, 20 years is that we are focusing a lot on solving our problems in terms of the, the huge challenges we are facing in technology, and hoping that technology will solve all this for us. And then you see that we try to innovate, try to make complete new designs, new smart technologies and innovations. But then I would say, just from the right or the left, how you would like to call it, Mother Nature comes and says, just stop doing everything, right? And that you see in just a few months that we reduce, for example, carbon emission immensely, enormously, a lot more than by all these small steps we were taking in terms of innovation. And I think this is such a great thing to actually continue on. If we could, as human beings, tell ourselves and work on systems where we stop also to a huge extent consuming in such a huge way, and to stop, for example, traveling in such a huge way, and to stop to continue this enormous amount of construction and moving food from one end of the world to the other. It really brings us to a very local condition. And I would say that nature did, I would maybe call it Mother Nature, the Earth, really did show us maybe in a very hard way, but they did show us how the world can also be, and how we can make steps with a lot more impact than we were trying, right? And then we were imagining even, because we were doing it by new rules, by new processes, by new incentives, by a bit more money for this and for that, and then trying to solve these 1.5 degrees worldwide as one of the things, because we have so much more to solve actually. And if you look at also the money which is involved, then that's also something really, really strange what is happening, right? I don't know, to be honest, I keep to the Dutch context because I know that one the best, although we work worldwide, but I know how it happened here in this Corona time. We spent in just a short amount of time, in these few months, we helped the economy, also the old economy, so that's also a wrong way sometimes, often, by maybe 60, 70, and some people say 19 billion euros, right? In this very short amount of time. That's a huge amount of money, because we see that problem just in front of us, and then we think we have to act now, so we don't see problems to spend that money. If you look at the goals we want to achieve in 2050 from the Paris Agreement, so first in 2030 and then 2050, it was calculated for Holland that we need about 30 billion euros. So it's a third, more or less, from all the money we spend just now in a few months. And that amount, that 30 billion, with that amount of money, we would be able to comply to all the needs or the agreements we made in the Paris Agreement. And that's really strange, right? If you look at that, if we come to that conclusion that we just, because it's so far and we don't understand, we have it good here, we don't see the direct problems yet so much, that we find we need so much time, we need so many dialogues, so many discussions in parliaments, among the society, to start really taking action. And once it's just in front of us and we have to act, we are able to do it a lot faster and with a lot more money even. This is crazy actually, if we look at that. So I hope really that when you ask the question, what did COVID bring us? That it really did bring us this. First of all, that by not only focusing on innovations and experiments and new rules, but just also not doing a lot of things and just making life so much more simple and more local. Yeah, that we can really speed up. Actually, we slow down, but we speed up in the achievements of climate adaptation. And the other way, on the other hand, we also should see that the financial means we have here, that we can just easily do it, right? So these are the two lessons we learned, I would say, in a very short amount of time. And one thing else, as long as we don't change and we don't transform, what will happen is that Mother Nature will continue. It's not that they don't want, that is kind of punishment, but any living organism will always try to find the balance, right? So as long as we as human beings continue disturbing, building in the wrong way, building cities in the wrong way, producing our food in the wrong way, then what will happen is that nature will fight back to find the balance, because nature wants to survive as well, just as we want. So the only thing we should really have to work on is to bring that into balance and to create cities that where nature, where our lives, with our way of consumption, the health of everyone and the social comfort for everyone will become in an equal state. And that is really beautiful to work on that as well. And what, if you come back to the first question you asked, this is what an architect or designers, creative minds can do to show how it can work and also to bring those together.
Okay, so thank you for sharing with us your thoughts, your architectural point of view, and your projects as well. To discuss about the present and the future of architecture, but also to discuss about our global global issues and emergency. Thanks also to our listeners. Hope we engaged a lot of people today. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you also very much, and for everyone being present or listening to this, and for inviting me. So hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.